What is up, everybody? This is Ari Liljenwall. Welcome to the very first episode of my new podcast, Lobbing Scorchers. If you're listening to this, you might already be familiar with who I am, probably from following me on Twitter. But just in case, I'm going to give a brief intro. I've got producer Noah.
What's going on, everyone?
Here with me. He's going to be handling the more technical side of things. I'm going to be laying down some takes. He's going to be laying down some takes as well.
When I'm lucky, you know.
When he's lucky. When I say he can. If you followed my content over the years, you know that I'm a longtime veteran of MLSsoccer.com. I started as the Seattle Sounders beat writer there in 2014, right after I graduated from college. Grinded the Sounders beat for about 5 years. In 2019, I moved to the editorial staff, and that's where I'm on every day, writing, editing, producing MLS content. So I truly have a disgusting, disturbing amount of knowledge about Major League Soccer. I'm also going to be doing something that I'm very excited about, which is I'm going to be getting back into the Seahawks. I covered the Seahawks when I was an intern for Seattle PI. I started my internship with them 3 days before the NFC Championship game where Richard Sherman made the tip on Kaepernick. That was my intro to the Seattle sports scene. I got to Seattle to cover Seattle sports for them, and 3 days later I was covering that NFC Championship game. So let's get into it. It's a pretty interesting time to be starting a podcast covering the Seattle Sounders, because you know there's been kind of two separate identities for the team so far this season. You know, you had the first 5-6 games of the season where they looked great. They looked like a Shield and MLS Cup contender. And then you have the last few weeks where they have decidedly not looked as much like that. So I think the question is, first of all, Noah, can they get back to that team that we saw earlier this season? Or are these last few weeks just what life is like now? There's been a lot of bad L's the last few weeks. A lot of bad L's. I mean, we could go down the list. I think it really all started with the 4-1 loss at Portland. Since then, you've had a loss to Sporting Kansas City at home, 2-1, right?
Yep.
Austin FC at home, LA Galaxy in the Open Cup, 1-0 to the San Jose Earthquakes most recently on Wednesday. And you know, when you look at a set of L's like that, I mean, what stands out to me isn't just that it's a stack of L's. It's just the types of teams that they were playing. It's not teams that you should be taking 0 points against, okay? Even dating back to the Portland game, Portland was averaging 1.0 whatever points per game at the time. Sporting Kansas City was literally the worst team in the league at the time. Austin FC struggling this year. San Jose, bad run of form going into the game on Wednesday. LA Galaxy, one of the worst teams in the league this year. So it's just a stretch of games that even with the injuries that they've had, and we're going to talk about that, and the squad rotation that they've had to employ, you would still expect this team to be at least collecting some points out of those games. And they haven't. They've sprinkled a couple wins in there, 1-0 wins.
Tough wins. I wouldn't even say they're wins, though.
I mean, you know, dub's a dub. 1-0 wins in Houston and 1-0 over the Red Bulls at home. So it's not like they've taken literally no points. To start off, let's talk about this Earthquakes game, because I think you can sort of look at that and try and project what's going to happen going forward based on what happened in that game. The Earthquakes game was tough.
Mm-hmm.
It was, but, you know, in a way, I will tell you that it made me feel a little bit better about the prospects of this offense going forward. And we're going to have to talk about expected goals, Noah, unfortunately.
Oh, God.
Okay. So in this game, I thought Seattle actually looked very good on offense. They were flying around. They were creating chances the whole game. 3 even expected goals. All right. Now, Noah is anti-expected goals.
Very.
We had a debate about that the other night.
Over
and he actually,
some Taco Bell.
Yeah, and he actually had some pretty bad takes. So I'm gonna let you dish your take on expected goals, and then we're gonna talk about this. What's your take on expected goals?
Well, I think personally, and honestly, a lot of it was just you die on a hill just to die on a hill to cause some chaos in the group chat.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I think my biggest take with expected goals is like, who is this stat for? And what does it really matter or indicate? You know, if you are looking at what could have happened, that rocks. That's great, but it doesn't really tell the story of what actually happened. We look at that San Jose game. Absolutely, the Sounders looked like on paper they should have won, but they also gave away an absolutely garbage goal and had a striker who continuously can't finish. And I don't know. I don't understand where the obsession with using the metric as an excuse or as a talking point to say this team is not as bad as they say they are, which, like, okay, fine, but they're still losing. They're still in an incredibly bad run of form. Is this all just to say, like, the Sounders are unlucky? Because I don't think that's the case either. So I guess my argument is just, what does this stat mean? It's not for anybody. It's not real life. That's kind of where I go with it.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you why that's a bad take. Okay, so you understand the concept, right? That performance and final result are not necessarily aligned or related.
Absolutely.
And that you can have individual games and stretches of a season I'm more talking about this individual game. You can have an individual game where you play well and you lose. And you can also have an individual game where you play poorly and you win, right?
Yes.
So the thing to look at to determine what to make of that is the underlying performance, right? So all expected goals is an indicator of what the underlying performance was. Because every L, I think you have to ask yourself about the underlying performance and what it can tell you.
Yeah.
So XG is a mechanism to be able to look at it and say, did the team play well? Did the team perform well? Were they playing well on offense? Did they generate chances?
Were they expected to score?
Right.
And did they?
But the point is that you have to look at performance and not just final result sometimes, because especially in soccer, the final result does not necessarily indicate what the performance was.
I think that's fair.
Like, when you look at, all L's are not created equal. All right. When you look at, say, the Sporting Kansas City game, all right, I don't know what the expected goals in that game was, but I'd imagine it was not very high because they weren't playing well on offense. So when I'm looking at an L, I find the underlying numbers to be instructive sometimes in not making an excuse. That's one. I think that does
sound like that though.
But it's okay. It's not about excusing an L. It's about, what can we read into any of this moving forward? So like, if you have high XG in a game, but you don't score, that means that you were playing well on offense in terms of generating chances, but you didn't finish. So you can kind of rightfully say, all right, if you keep playing that way moving forward and you're generating chances at that rate and you're still producing high expected goals, then you will start to score goals. And those are trends that you can always see in every season. And that's why it's valuable to look at. So that's why when I look at this Earthquakes game, 3 even is an insanely high number of XG. All right. Anything above 2.0 is very, very high. And honestly, if you're up at like 2.5 to 3, you can rightfully say that, like, the way you played on offense could have very feasibly resulted in like 3 or 4 goals, or even those outlier games where you see 5 or 6. Like that's how high XG that was.
Well, I agree with that, but I also think that and I think you'll probably talk about the eye test and how that matters in the sense of XG.
I forgot to mention that, but yeah.
But this game didn't feel like a 3xG game. It felt like a game where they were putting in chances and having like missing the biggest sitters in the world, which like that can be unlucky. But if you look at the run of form and you kind of look at what's been happening and people keep saying, oh, look at this XG next game. No, but look at this XG next game. No, but look at this XG. It's like, okay, I'm happy with taking an XG look at my favorite number 9, a bear, and saying, okay, how can we find a better way to utilize him? Because clearly he's generating chances, but he's not finishing them.
Right. Well, I think,
but I think the excuse half is my only problem. I think that my take initially, I'll just be honest. I was throwing around the XG is fake, made up stat that doesn't matter, which brought us to here, which is not a good take, and I am happy to admit that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what you said about the eye test is important because XG can be misleading. It can be misleading. I definitely have had individual games where I see Seattle or any team where the XG is super high and it doesn't match up with the eye test at all. And I'm like, how... It did not feel like there was that many high-quality chances in the game. How is the XG so high? There are definitely games like that. San Jose game was not one of those games. I could name 4, 5, like you even said, they missed a lot of sitters.
There was a lot of high percentage
when you miss
chances.
That many high percentage chances in a game like that, that is unlucky. That is unlucky, and if you perform at that level over in extended sample size, those will be goals. Those will be goals eventually, unless, you can be the most snake bit team of all time and be getting unlucky over a large sample size. Like, there are examples of that. But generally speaking, if your XG numbers are that high over an extended sample, you're going to see goals eventually. Like, that's why it's a useful indicator, So in terms of the Earthquakes game, I'm not saying that the XG total excuses the loss, all right? But what I am saying is that if there's a reason for hope that this offense can start, performing at a higher level going forward, it would be that they were getting the chances in that game that if you keep doing that over an extended sample, I think you will see them start to finish those chances. Right now, really no one on the team is finishing their chances. The only guy on the team that's scoring goals is Paul Rothrock. Okay? Paul Rothrock has been doing everything he can. Every time he's played, he's putting it in the back of the net. He single-handedly tried to keep the U.S. Open Cup run alive. He scored a diving header in L.A. He scored the game winner in Houston. He had another Open Cup goal against the San Diego Loyal. But, Paul Rothrock, man, he's only one guy. You can't task him with carrying the entire attack. There's just, when you were preparing for the season, there's only so much you could have rightfully hedged on Paul Rothrock. And there's other guys on the team that needed to be picking up the slack, and they haven't been finishing their chances. When I look at this offense, especially in the San Jose game, Raul Ruidiaz has been out the last few weeks with a hamstring injury. That sort of coincided with when the goals dried up. I mean, he hasn't really played a lot this season. He's played like 200 and some odd minutes. Okay. So he's not just the best finisher on the team. He's one of the best finishers in MLS.
He's only played 7 matches and only started 2 of the 7.
And he was one of the ones who missed multiple sitters in the San Jose game. That's kind of what I'm saying, man. Like, those 2 chances that Ruidiaz missed. Okay, there's one off the Reed Baker Whiting cross.
Yep.
Where he just mishit it.
Yep.
And then there was one off the Leo Chu cross where he had the chance he was kind of trying to chest it in and just kind of bottled it. Like,
yeah. But that doesn't seem like a striker who is not getting to the right play. I think you could argue XG on that. That's like a striker who has rust on.
Exactly.
That's like coming back on.
How many games have you seen since he's been in Seattle where he's missed 2 chances like that in one game. And how much, I would put a lot of money on if there are 2 similar quality chances in the next game that he's probably going to finish one.
Yeah.
So
he in 32 he played 32 minutes. He had 2 shots on target, 2 shots off target, and he completed 8 of his passes, which is 100%. In 58 minutes, Hebert had 2 shots on target total.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't want to put this all on Hebert.
No. I'm just saying it's a good comparison of like he was making it work.
For
it just
sure.
wasn't.
Yeah, I'm more talking about like my take previously. Guys aren't finishing their chances. Hebert is guilty of that. He would probably tell you that.
XG champion.
He leads the league in missed big chances, but that's a crazy stat, and I just don't think that is going to sustain based on his track record. Like, I know everyone's frustrated with it right now because of how many bad chances he's missed. My honest take on that is that if he continues getting big chances at that rate, you can go back to his track record with NYCFC. I mean, he's a pretty proven MLS goal scorer. He's a good finisher. I think he's a little snake bit right now. I think Hebert, assuming that everything else holds roughly equal, I think he's going to end up with 6 to 8 goals this season, that's fine for your backup 9. But whether he's getting unlucky right now or if his finishing touch is just off, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, those chances aren't going in. And I don't know. That to me seems like that's probably the biggest problem with the offense is that, at least in the last game, the chances were all there. And speaking in general with Hebert, the chances have been there. He's just not finishing.
Right.
And you have to hope that he gets in form, which I think based on his track record that he probably will. But Rui Diaz coming back and getting back to his form, that's the most important thing right now. The other big thing is getting Christian Roldan back. Christian Roldan has been in concussion protocol since April, since the St. Louis game. And that's the second biggest issue with the offense. I mean, the whole offense is essentially based around 2 Roldans on the right side of the field. You got one in midfield and one on the back line. And you basically spam one or both of them the ball on the right side, let them wreak havoc, create chances, put in service. Christian can score some goals. The whole offense runs through him. And I think if anyone had any doubt or questions as to how valuable Christian Roldan is to this team, that should be extinguished now because, for all the talk we just did about how high the XG was in the San Jose game, I mean, there were multiple games in this run of form where the offense was not performing like that. The XG and the chances were not there. And so when you look at those games, I think Christian's absence is probably the biggest factor. The offense hasn't really figured out how to run without him at right mid. So I'm pretty sure we're going to see that, they play Portland tomorrow. So we're going to see. I'm not sure if he's going to start, but assuming he's through concussion protocol and he's been at training and all that, I'd imagine he'll start and probably play at least 60, 70 minutes. It's not like a muscle injury, right? Where you need to ease your way into the full minute load necessarily. Like if he's symptom free and feeling good and, he might not be 90 fit yet, could be the thing. But I think Christian's going to play the majority of the game tomorrow. And I think my prediction is you're instantly going to see the offense look better.
I believe that.
You're instantly going to see the offense look better. He makes that big a difference. People don't like to hear it, but everyone likes to think they have enough depth to withstand an MLS season like this. But if you just go down the list of who's been out in recent weeks, a lot of it is as simple as just getting guys back. I mean, Rui Diaz did his hamstring. Christian's been in concussion protocol. Nuhu got malaria. Kellen Rowe did his meniscus. Josh Atencio had a hurt quad. Hebert earlier in the season pulled his hammy. A lot of the time, it's as simple as getting your guys back. Look at Sporting Kansas City right now. I think they're 4-1-1 in their last 6. They were going into the game that they won in Seattle. They were averaging 0.3 points per game. And everyone was talking about how they're the worst team in the league. And they were points-wise and record-wise at that time. But the reality is they hadn't had either of their DPs, Alan Polito or Gotti Kinda, playing together in like a year and a half. Okay? The Seattle game was the first game where they both played together and they both got on the score sheet and they won the game. And now they're 4-1-1 in their last 6. A lot of these things come down to health sometimes. And I think that's part of it. But the problem with that is that you need your depth to be able to sustain you sometimes. And Seattle didn't really prove in this last stretch that their depth can sustain them in a very meaningful capacity. All right. They got the Houston win. That Houston had 9 guys on the field. That was probably a game where if it's 11-on-11, you're pretty happy to get out of Houston 0-0. The Red Bulls game was better. Jordan Morris got a goal. He got his first goal since April 1st, and he got injured on the play, which, God, that was so tilting. That was the biggest buzzkill probably I've ever seen after a goal at Lumen Field. Like, the goal itself was so cathartic because the team hadn't been scoring. Jordan hadn't been scoring. And he gets this great goal from Leo Chu. Really nice finish right in front of goal. And then he knew he was injured. It was apparent he was injured immediately, the way he reacted and was moving. And it was just like, God damn it, dude.
Not again.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Another
on the
one.
play where he scores it. So it doesn't seem like it's that serious, a groin injury. He seems to think he's going to be back in a couple weeks. But just in the context of all the other injuries that have happened, it's just really obnoxious that it happened on the play where he scored. And so they hold on to win that game 1-0. But by and large, They really just couldn't withstand all the absences that they've had over the last few weeks. And, that's probably, they're getting guys back now. And I think that you'll see form turn around a little bit with the guys they got back. But there's just going to be points through the rest of the season where they have to lean on that depth again. And they need to be able to collect points, like in those situations. You can't just punt every game when you don't have your first choice guys. I mean, you got Leagues Cup coming up. You'll have a playoff run, hopefully. So Christian Roldan, he can't play every single game. He can't. He's not Iron Man. Mm-mm. He's not going to be out there every week. They're going to have to rotate again. And so I would say overall, reasons for optimism would be that the offense looked a lot better in San Jose or against San Jose. And they're getting healthier. Rui Diaz is coming back. Christian Roldan's coming back. Jordan Morris theoretically shouldn't be out for all that much longer. Hopefully just 1 or 2 more games. And I think just those things right there, that's going to make a huge difference. But if I had to pick a reason for concern on the flip side of that, it would be that the rotated depth lineups didn't perform very well over the last few weeks. They were not taking points in games where you would expect them to be able to take at least a point in a lot of the games where they've taken losses. So that's kind of the two sides of the situation. Huge game tomorrow against Portland at Lumen Field. And they're going to need to be up for this game. The Portland Timbers, this is their Super Bowl. They live for this game. They don't seemingly really care that much about any other opponent. I don't know how else you explain the fact that they scored 4 goals in 19 minutes against Seattle at Providence Park.
It's personal.
The first game in April. They play angry. They play angry. They turn into the 1996 Chicago Bulls every time these games.
They did. They seriously did.
They looked like Real Madrid for those 20 minutes. They were scoring bicycle kicks and ripping off 90-yard counters, putting shots from outside the box, upper V.
They look like
that's how they're gonna do that again. Like, I really don't think that Portland's gonna come here and bunker and play defensive like a lot of teams try to do here. I don't. If I'm Gio Savarese, like I don't see any reason to do that. The last like 3 or 4 times that Seattle and Portland have played, it just seems like they're on some sort of just nuclear intensity level that Seattle can't really quite equal. They couldn't equal it at all in the last game. And they gave up 4 goals in 19 minutes. So, I mean, I don't know. They got to be ready for that. That's coming again. Portland's also in a bad run of form again. You know, they were struggling before that first game, and the whole talk was, oh, this is going to jumpstart our season. Like, this is the jolt we needed. And then they went back to being pretty middling again.
Yep.
And then now they're like, we need the boost again. Like a road win in Seattle will boost us again. So they're going to come out firing. I'm pretty sure. Like, you know, they're kind of a sit back and hit you on the counter type of team traditionally. So in that sense, you know, you might see those tactics, and that's how they normally play. But in terms of, you know, going into like a full on shell and trying to gut out a 0-0, like you see teams do when they come to Seattle a lot. If I'm the Timbers, I see no reason at all to do that based on how the last few of these games have gone. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm waiting to see, I guess, if Seattle's going to be up for that, because they haven't been the last few games, and they need to be. They need to be in this game based on the form that they've been in. So I'm looking forward to it, though. These derby games they're always a fun time, and it's going to be a sick day because you've got the doubleheader with OL Reign playing right after against the Portland Thorns. So doubleheader action. I definitely encourage everyone to stay for both games and check out the Reign. They've got a lot of superstar players. I believe they're second on the NWSL table right now, so they're in good form, and they're a really fun team to watch. The last doubleheader where they did this was awesome. Like that was a great event. They do it up big. There's all kinds of stuff like going around the stadium, so
it's pretty sweet.
It'll be fun, but it's definitely pressure. The pressure's on a little bit. You know, as tough as these last few weeks have been, Seattle is still technically first place.
You can't complain. You can't say anything bad about the Seattle Sounders Football Club right now. They are in first place in the West.
Look, I'm not saying don't complain, but I do think that's pretty funny.
It's hilarious.
Like, how is this possible? Like, after every loss they've taken over the last few weeks, I pull up the table and I'm like, all right, who leaped them? And no one ever does.
No.
Okay, so part of that,
the bottom and the top of the table are separated by like 8 points right now.
Well,
I think
there's that, and then the more important caveat is that they've played the most games out of everybody.
Yeah. I can't remember the last time we haven't had a midweek game.
Yeah. So
whether it's Open Cup,
Seattle's played 16 games, and a couple other teams have played 16, but everyone else right below them on the table has games in hand. And all right, big thing to remember here is St. Louis and LAFC, who are tied for, so St. Louis is in second and LAFC is in third. They're tied on 25 points, but St. Louis has the total wins tiebreaker. But either way, St. Louis has 3 games in hand and LAFC has 4 games in hand.
Yeah.
Because they're in Concacaf Champions League, and I think that's actually a good segue.
That's a perfect transition. It's like you've done this before.
God damn. Yeah, that was clean.
That was fire.
They're playing in Concacaf Champions League. They played the first leg earlier this week against Club Leon of Liga MX. And it's a 2-leg series. And LAFC did not look good in that first game.
No.
They kind of got run over. They did. Steve Cherundolo, their coach, even admitted it. He said it was extremely lucky that they were only down. They're down 2-1. Club Leon went up 2-0 and had, I believe they had a goal called off. So it could have been even worse. And LAFC would have been down 2-0, but Denis Bwanga scored on literally like the last kick of the game to make it 2-1, which that's a huge lifeline.
Yeah.
That puts them right in it. Like,
yes.
As poorly as the game went for them, Like, they have every chance still to win this series, taking it back to BMO Stadium. Like, they are by no means out of it. But I think it's fair to say, you know, every game in CCL is a test. And I think it's pretty fair to say they did not really pass their first test in that road leg. A road leg in a 2-game CCL series, your goal is to get out of there 0-0 or with a draw in some other type of capacity. Seattle passed their test last year. I'll just say that. They went.
Not everyone can do it.
Not everyone can do it. I mean, they played Pumas to 2-2 in the road leg in CCL last year. That
was a thrilling game.
That was a thrilling game. Yeah, Ladero had the penalty kick at the very end to tie that.
Let's just say there were some opposing fans
They were not happy about that. I think both of Seattle's goals in the game were penalties.
Yeah.
If you can get out of the first leg in a draw as the road team, that's a phenomenal result. Like, as soon as Seattle did that last year, I was like, all right, they have a great chance. They have a great chance to win. Because, you know, all you need to do is win by 1 goal.
Yeah.
If LAFC wins by 1 goal in leg 2, which is on Sunday, then it goes to extra time. And you also really, like, you know, say it's 1-0, you really can't concede.
No.
You really can't. So they're up against it a little bit. And I just want to say, like, they better not choke. That said, LAFC choking would be pretty funny.
Yeah.
It would be pretty funny because, you know, the way they talk about themselves, both within the club and their fan base, you know, they're feeling themselves right now. They are, and rightfully so.
Oh, absolutely.
I would not take that away from them.
No.
They do. They kind of run the league right now.
They have a leg to stand on.
But at the same time, this is sort of like the next frontier for them to become like the preeminent, dominant MLS club. With that in mind, like the kind of status that LAFC has within the league right now, for their own sake, they can't choke this. They can't choke this. They got it. They got to win this. I'm not really a fan of like saying like, you know, got to win that game, but they kind of do.
Yeah. For
the expectations that they've put on themselves, both through how they've played, which has been phenomenal. I mean, they've been the best team in the league all the way since the start of last year. No question. The way they've balanced CCL this year has been extremely impressive. Probably the best job I've seen an MLS club do of playing in CCL and maintaining their league form. Seattle actually did a pretty good job of that last year while CCL was going. And then after CCL is when it all fell apart.
Because they push all those games together that you had to postpone.
And so that's one thing I'll say about LAFC too. They're talking a big game about how they've managed to balance both so effectively. And, you know, I'm giving them credit for that. But they've also, they did it for Seattle too last year where they tweaked the schedule so they didn't have as many games, as many league games while they were in Champions League. But so that's what's allowed LAFC. They haven't had to rotate like a crazy amount. They really have not. If you look at their starting 11s week to week, yeah, they have been rotating a little bit, but I don't know. I look at their lineups every week, and Bouanga is always in there. Vela's always in there. Apoku, Ilie. They rotate their CBs and their fullbacks a fair amount, and they've done a great job at building that roster. So they really do have the depth to be able to do that. But like what I'm saying is like all their big dogs, it seems like they're just playing in every league game and then also playing in every Champions League game. When their schedule gets crazy because because it's going to be backloaded with all these games that they haven't been playing during CCL,
which is 4 right now.
Yeah, they're not gonna be able to do that. They're gonna actually have to rotate, and they're also probably gonna have to contend with a little bit of fatigue and potentially some injuries. You know, I definitely like.
They have to play St. Louis. Like, that game was postponed, and then they also have to play Atlanta already. and then however many other games they need to play.
The fixture congestion is coming for them, is my point. And, it's entirely possible that they can just keep ripping through the league and stay at 2 point whatever points per game they're at. I do think their roster is good enough to do that, but they're going to have to prove they can do that for sure, because I don't know. Am I wrong in thinking that it feels like they didn't get tested with squad rotation and fixture congestion as much as Seattle did last year? Like, I could be tripping on that.
I think you're correct in the sense that like they've been solid, like they've been healthy. Clearly they have a good training staff. I mean, that's probably part of it. Who knows?
Good training staff, great roster,
good depth. And also like, honestly, they haven't had to play that many games. Like, I'm looking at their schedule right now. It was like they played a midweek game against Sporting and drew that game. They played RSL at home and I believe that was at home. Maybe that was away, but they beat them. And then you had the Earthquakes. Like, they haven't played anyone really. And then they just bounced out of the Open Cup because they didn't care. So they had between the last league game that they played, which was 5/20, and this final match was on 5/31. So they had essentially 11 days of rest for anyone who's anyone.
Yeah.
Between those games.
The games are going to pile up on them. And I'm not predicting that that's necessarily going to nuke their form or anything. I'm just more curious to see like how they handle it when the fixture congestion really turns up, you know? And we'll see how that goes. But
they're going to have basically a game every 4 days for the next like month.
Yeah. Yeah. And if they can average over 2 points per game doing that, I mean, more power to them.
Absolutely.
No one can really tell them much right now. Other than that, they didn't play well at all in the first leg, and that the pressure is really on them in the second leg. It's hard for me to imagine that they're going to go home and play as poorly as they did in the road leg.
I'd be shocked.
That would surprise me. I think they're going to turn up.
I just wonder, realistically, what happens when Leon scores a goal.
That's the thing. They really can't concede.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't. So if they take 3-1, then
yeah. What do you think about it goes to added extra time or to penalties? What are you looking at there, you think?
I would think that the longer the game goes, the more it kind of plays in their favor.
I agree with
having it at home. I think if it goes, so if they win in regulation by 1 goal, that's automatically goes to extra time because it would be tied on aggregate and there's no road goals in the final. So,
if there were road goals, it'd be a completely different story.
If there were road goals, that Bouanga goal at the end, I would have made the 2-1 a pretty like
it would basically
good. It would have been an actively good result.
Yeah.
Without the road goals, it's still 2-1 is not terrible, to be honest. That gives you plenty of a chance to win, but it puts you up way more against it than if you had the road goals tiebreaker, because now if you concede a 2-1, all that does is get you to extra time, which could be advantageous for them, but like that's still a very 50-50 pressure packed situation.
Yeah. You never want to have to be in that position.
You have to, if they concede, they have to score 3 times and not concede again to win in regulation. It makes it really hard to win.
They do have the roster to score 3 times, though, I will say.
They do, but I mean, Club Leon took it to them. I thought LAFC was, as I understood it, favored, and they were pretty comfortably considered a better team, even by people who follow Liga MX.
Yeah,
Leon's
LAFC not really considered.
They're a kind of mid Liga MX team this year, to my understanding. I don't really follow Liga MX that closely.
Liga MX knowers over here. Yeah.
But they're not considered like the LAFC of Liga MX.
No.
So I think that LAFC should be able to handle them at home. But like, if you just look at how the first match went, they were under it like the whole game.
Yeah.
Cherundolo called it their worst performance of the season. He said that they can't afford to play like that if they want to have a chance at winning on Sunday. But they better win on Sunday.
Gotta win on Sunday.
They better win on Sunday. I think we're good to wrap the Sounders and MLS section right there. We're going to jump into some Seahawks next. I'll make a confession real quick. The Seahawks audio we've recorded a few days ago. We've taken a couple runs at recording this, and timing and certain things, tweaks I wanted to make have kind of pushed it back. But I laid down, or Noah and I laid down some red hot Seahawks audio as part of all that we're going to fire off. I think it came out pretty good. So I'm really excited to talk some Seahawks and just get back into talking about this team. I think I'm going to start by talking about last season. They were expected to be terrible. All right. And I totally bought into that. They traded Russell Wilson, who had been the quarterback for the last 10 years and played it at a very high level, won a Super Bowl, signed a big old contract. They traded him. My reaction to that trade, I'll tell you, Noah, I straight up, I was like, this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
This is a bad idea. You shouldn't trade Russell until you have like a contingency plan, okay? Like going into a situation where you don't have a quarterback, that's probably the most dangerous game you can play as an NFL team. You can end up in purgatory for decades doing that. And when I saw they traded him, I liked the haul they got back in terms of value, but it didn't seem like they had any plan at quarterback. And I thought this was a situation where they were just going to be like middling and putting out these like league average game manager quarterbacks because they traded their one that's actually dynamic and that's actually a franchise quarterback. I thought they were going to suck, man. And you can ask any of my friends who I'm on group chats with where we talk about the Hawks. I was adamantly campaigning. This is embarrassing. I was adamantly campaigning for them to start Drew Lock, who they got back in the trade with the Broncos. I was fully in on that because my logic was Drew Lock, there's at least some sort of unknown there. Okay? He didn't play well with the Broncos. People kind of think he's a bust, but he's clearly physically talented. He's like 6'5", rocket arm. He's a good college quarterback, second-round pick. Like, maybe if you throw him in the Seahawks system with Pete coaching him up, there's like untapped upside there. That's the only hope that I saw because the alternative was Geno Smith. And I can't wait to talk about some Geno Smith because I think this is one of my favorite sports stories of all time. It's one of my favorite sports stories of all time. I'm dead serious. And on top of that, it's one of the funniest sports stories of all time. So the combination of legitimate inspiration that I take from it and the comedy of this whole situation, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Geno Smith had been a backup quarterback for almost a decade before last season. He was drafted by the New York Jets in the second round 10 or so years ago. Never panned out. He was written off, famously, but he didn't write back. He didn't write back.
I was waiting for it.
He didn't write back. He was written off. People thought this guy is nothing more than a backup quarterback in the NFL. All right? He bounced around the league a little bit. Never got a starting job. Was biding his time. Backed up some good quarterbacks. Backed up Eli Manning, I think. Backed up Phillip Rivers. Backed up Russell. But ain't nobody in the entire United States think that Geno Smith was going to start for the Seahawks last year and it was going to go well. I didn't think there was any way. I didn't think there was any way that after 10 years of sitting on the bench, this guy, he's just going to come back in and light it up and make the Pro Bowl? Like, what are we even talking about, Pete? And Pete would gas him up in the pressers too. And I was like, Pete, can you fucking just stop with the Geno thing? Like, just start Lock. It'll be more fun. Team's going to suck anyway. Don't give me this like Geno is the guy stuff, Pete. I thought all that, man. I thought all that.
Pete Doubter coin is
We're going to talk
plummeting.
about the Pete Doubters. We're going to talk about the Pete Doubters. We're going to talk about the Geno Doubters too. But anyway, Geno won the starting job in training camp. And Drew Lock was the backup. Geno's the starting quarterback. We had all those draft picks from Denver. All right. So Denver, to get Russell Wilson, shipped us Drew Lock, but also like 5 draft picks. Like, I don't even know what the haul was. There might have been multiple. There was multiple first rounders involved. There was like a second rounder involved. There was either like 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounders. Every draft pick that they have, they threw it at us to get Russell. And Pete and John were like, "All right, bet we're gonna take that, and you can have him." And dude, everyone on Twitter and nationally was talking about how bad we got fleeced. Do you remember that? Do you remember that shit?
I do remember it.
And I was
part of that. The pundits were going crazy.
The pundits were going crazy, but also like people started to talk about the team like we were a fucking joke, you know?
Which I honestly appreciated because I was ready to go back to the days of like Seahawks being like a thing where we didn't just have a bunch of fake fans.
Yeah.
You know?
No, and
we needed a weed out.
I could see that, but it still kind of bothered me because, like, you know, as down as I was on the quarterback situation, like the people talking about the Seahawks like they were some kind of meme team, like that's not going to be competitive, like we're the New York Jets of the last like few years. That pissed me off.
It was a Jets type move, though.
Well, so it seemed.
Yeah.
So it like, and I guess that's fair. Like, I get why people were talking like that. And I was doing that myself to a lesser degree. So it's not that I don't get where it came from, but it irritated me because like when people were talking about, oh, like the Hawks are tanking, the Hawks don't tank, dude. Pete, that's not like something, it kind of like surprised me that people don't understand that Pete and John, but mainly Pete, like, that's not how he thinks of football. Like, he thinks of football. He doesn't think of it as like you know, I'm trying to game the operation and I'm going to lose games intentionally to get higher draft picks so I can like game the system to win later. No, fuck that. Like he's about competing every year, and that's kind of what I've always liked and appreciated about Pete. Like he would never tank, and the whole time people were talking about us tanking, I was like, you guys can talk about us tanking all you want. We're gonna win 7 to 9 games. Like there is no tanking here. It's not how we roll.
I really only cared about one game, and that was genuinely the Denver game. Playing Denver week 1, prime time.
Dude,
that's all. I was like, dude, anything can happen, but if we win this game, we win the trade.
Dude,
in my mind, that was all I cared about.
I was more nervous, like watching that game. Like I always tell people this when I talk about like my emotions watching that game. That literally felt like watching like a final. Like
it felt like the Super Bowl.
It felt like the Super Bowl.
It felt like the Super Bowl. No, it did.
I'm not even like, you know how when you're watching a final or the Super Bowl and like you're really tuned into every single moment, every single play, and every time a guy makes a play, you think about like the significance that play could have, or if a particular player is doing well, you're like, wow, this is like legacy stuff that we could be witnessing right now. Every play, every moment feels powerful and significant. That's how I fucking felt watching Week 1 versus the Denver Broncos,
which is crazy because
it was so fun to watch.
Normally, I'm totally good with skipping to the second half of a Seahawks game because I don't want to watch the first half anyway and get my hopes up.
Yeah.
So it's just like I might as well. But I was glued to the TV that game. I couldn't.
I'm glad you felt that because I don't get like that nervous for games anymore. Like I've been working in sports for so long that like I'm kind of desensitized to like the nerves and the stakes of it. But like that game, my heart was racing. Like you know, there are specific games that get me going, like the CCL final and all the MLS Cups, playoff games, like those, like I get juiced for, and I 100% like felt that during that game. And that game was just the prelude, man. That game was just the prelude to one of the funniest seasons that I have ever seen. And I think you really like you got to talk about Geno as the big part of this. And I want to talk about something with Geno because there's been something that's kind of pissing me off with this, with kind of the rhetoric that's been going around over the offseason. Geno signed a contract extension. He got paid a bunch of money. Not even that much comparatively to some of the quarterback contracts you see out there. I think he took a bit of a team-friendly deal because he recognized what the vibes are right now.
It's all in the incentives,
he's a smart
too,
guy. He knows.
For his contract.
There's incentives. He still got paid. There is kind of a take among not as much Seahawks fans, but some Seahawks fans, but more so nationally, that it seems like people are talking about Geno like this is like fool's gold. Like he kind of, it's like a nice story. He played some good football, but he was kind of mid at the end of last season. Like, he's not Patrick Mahomes. Like, he wasn't that good. Like, it's kind of like questionable that the Seahawks paid him. You hear all this stuff out there, right? I don't know who you all are talking about with that. I don't know who you're talking about. You're not talking about the same guy that I'm talking about. You're not talking about the guy that I watched play football last year. What's your criteria for what he needed to do to earn that extension and earn his respect? Is it passing yards? He had 4,200 of those. Top 2 or 3 in the NFC, I think. Touchdowns? Threw 30 of them. Most in the NFC, actually. Efficiency and accuracy? Dude completed 70% of his passes. People don't really do that much anymore. That's like some Drew Brees shit. That was a storyline on the team for years. Russell was like, this is the year, guys. Like, I'm going to complete 70. Pete's like, Russ, he's going to get 70 this year. Geno goes out there. His first year starting in 10 years, he completes 70 off rip. So, rushing yards too.
Yep.
Dual threat. You want a dual threat quarterback? 5.4 yards per carry or whatever it was. So,
Pro Bowl.
Put some respect on his name. I really don't know what we're talking about with this idea that he fell off or wasn't very good. You had to have not watched the games. You had to have not watched the games. I watched the games. I watched every single game. And I know the stretches that people are talking about where his play dipped a little bit. You got to look at the big picture with these things, man. The guy threw 30 touchdowns, 4,200 yards, 100 rating. That's just as good a quarterback rating as Russell was ever putting up when he was the quarterback.
Only 11 interceptions, too.
Only 11 picks. Okay, but here's another talking point. I've seen this take a lot. I'm going to address this one.
But also, Russ gave up 11 interceptions last year, too.
Well, okay, Russ, meanwhile, it's a good point. Russ, meanwhile, was leading one of the most incompetent NFL offenses I have ever seen. It's unreal that they put that out some of those games.
Scooby-Doo style offense.
I couldn't believe what I was watching. So because of the trade, we had the Broncos' first round pick. So there was vested interest in them being bad because that meant the worse that they finished, the higher draft pick that we get. So I've probably had the most fun I've ever had watching football, just following the Broncos' descent into chaos and anarchy.
Yeah.
Like,
I think
Toronto
one of my
FC.
favorite moments was KJ Hamler, former Penn State player, hit just a perfect route, wide open in the end zone, standing there, waving his arms at Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson just overthrows everyone. He takes his helmet off and just slams it on the turf and walks off just to lose the game.
I remember that play. Russell threw it to the completely wrong guy. KJ Hamler was wide open, easy touchdown. It's 4th down. The game is literally on the line. If you get in the zone right there, the game's over. It's a dub. All you have to do is throw the designed route to KJ Hamler. He's wide ass open, touchdown. You have a dub. Instead, I have no idea what he's looking at. He fucking throws a absolute seed into Cortland Sutton with Stephon Gilmore, one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, on him. And the dude breaks up the pass easily. And the game's over. and they take the L. It was every week like that with that team. Every Broncos game I watched, and I watched a lot, it was like 5 or 6 different things like that. And every week I had the greatest time watching it. It was so funny. Nathaniel Hackett, their coach last year, I love that guy. I think he's probably my favorite NFL coach of all time. The abject chaos and incompetence that he injected into that franchise was second to none, and it was so beautiful to watch because every single L that they racked gave us a higher draft pick, and we ended up with the number 5 overall pick, man. Number 5 overall pick. That is crazy. Meanwhile, you've got Geno throwing for 4,200 yards, 30 touchdowns, 100 rating, and making the Pro Bowl. Getting back to my point from earlier, like, I don't really know how you could look at how he played last year and have like this contrarian doubt that like he's not the guy. What were you watching? I don't get it. Like, what games were you watching? Every week, man, this guy was balling out of his mind. Some of the throws he was making, I couldn't believe what I was watching. I literally couldn't believe what I was watching. He would hit these throws that if Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes did it, I'd have been like, damn, that's like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes just doing their thing. Like, regular people can't make a throw like that. Geno did that, and he did that a lot, like multiple times a game. We also lost multiple games where Geno played out of his mind and the defense gave up like 42 points. Yeah. So like he's like Paul Rothrock, man. He can only do so much. He can only do so much. If the offense puts up 380, 400 yards, we score 38 points, and Geno's lighting it up all day, and we take the loss, that's not the quarterback's fault. It kind of blows my mind that people look at quarterback wins and losses as like the be-all, end-all like that, you know? Like, oh, like they're like the Seahawks went 9-8. How good could Geno have really been? You don't know football if that's your take. And I don't really know football either, but you really don't know football. Like, if you look at a game I can name 2 Seahawks games last year off the top of my head. The Raiders game and the Saints game, where Geno literally was going nuts all day.
If you even look at NFL's
we lost.
Own quarterback index, where they ranked all 68 starting quarterbacks, guess where he lands? Top 10. He's number 9 behind Jared Goff and Tua.
Okay, so, and here's the thing about that. I see very little reason why Geno isn't going to take a step forward this year compared to where he was last year. The conventional wisdom, the take, if you're trying to be a contrarian, is, well, you know, he played some good football, but like he got pretty lucky, or like a lot. People love pointing out like turnover worthy throws. That, get out of here with turnover worthy throws. Okay, if the DB doesn't pick it off, it's not a pick. All right, and if you're gonna start just adding interceptions to every quarterback's tally that had turnover worthy throws, you got to do that with Josh Allen. You got to do that with Patrick Mahomes. You got to do that with all the.
That's why you have good receivers, though.
Yeah, I mean,
too.
Yeah, it's just you're nitpicking. You're nitpicking because you don't want to admit that he's that good. You don't want to admit it. You can't. You're nitpicking because you have priors that you want confirmed. That's all you're doing. You had your priors. You can't. It upsets you that Geno played that well because it went against your priors. And you can't admit it. You can't admit it. That's sad. Take the L. Take the L. He proved you wrong every week. You already took the L with that take.
And the way his contract
turnover worthy throws, I think that shit is ridiculous.
The way his contract is structured too, it's not a huge hit to the Seahawks overall. It's not even close to what Russ was absolutely demolishing off of,
oh man, I don't even remember the figures on how much money the Broncos paid Russ. Yeah, but it's a lot.
But like, even when he was at the Hawks, he was just eating up so much cap, and now you have a guy who, let's say he does bust, maybe not this year, maybe next year. You now have the space to figure it out, and it's not a huge deal.
For sure.
It's not like
that's a great
out
point.
$1 bajillion million.
That's a great point. The contract is very team friendly. But my thing is, like, I really, we'll see how it pans out. But if you think about how quarterbacks develop, like they usually take a leap between their first year and their second year. Like if you look at the good quarterbacks in the league, like that's usually how it goes. They have their struggles in their first year. It's not like perfect. And then they'll like second and third year, they progress forward. People aren't really allowing for the possibility that Geno could be in for a leap like that only because he's 32. If he was 24 and the Seahawks had drafted him, where the Jets drafted him and they had let him play a year, and he played how he did last year, people would be talking about him taking like a nuclear step into one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, y'all realize that, right? Like,
he had better stats than Tom Brady last year. So
he had better stats than most of the other quarterbacks out there. I thought he was a top 5 to 7 quarterback, like straight up. Like I watch a lot of the NFL. There wasn't that many guys out there that were outplaying Geno. I'm not saying he was Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, Joe Burrow, but he was closer to that level than people are actually giving him credit for. Like I might be going too hot with these takes, but
No.
he really was not. Like just look at the numbers, like if you think I'm giving too hot a take, like I don't know what to tell you. Like the stats literally prove your take wrong and my take right. So like, I don't know what to tell you, but my point is like, there's at bare minimum, there's a great possibility that Geno is going to improve. Think about it. He hadn't played in 10 years. This is the first time he actually has game reps and game film to look at. What could I have done better there? How did I miss that read? What throw was there when I made like the wrong throw? What could I have done better? This is the first time he has a full season of his own tape to look at and work on those things, drill those things, fine tune, improve. He's also an incredibly smart quarterback. I like watching Geno play football so much more than I like watching Russell play football because Geno is a smart quarterback. He's a tactician. He's got rhythm. He's got timing. His pre-snap reads are lights out. The way he diagnoses defenses, you can see in games. You don't even have to know football that well to see how well he anticipates, how well he reads the game. Like, Russell was an agent of chaos. The whole game plan was essentially we snap the ball, he's going to run around, and he's going to fire it into the abyss. And he's really got really good deep ball, so that's going to work most times. Geno's a tactician out there. A full offseason of reps to fine-tune and improve that stuff, that's going to be sick. I think he's going to take a step forward. Because the Denver Broncos were a disastrous tire fire, Seahawks got the number 5 overall pick. And there was a lot of debate as to what they should do with that pick. The general consensus was that they needed help along the front 7. I agreed with that general consensus. I thought that, the weakness of the team, the reason that they only went 9-8 despite having a top 5 Pro Bowl quarterback was because the front 7 was terrible. And the teams were putting up 400 or 500 yards a game. They were dropping 30, 40 points. It was infuriating to watch. Seahawks football is supposed to be all about defense, physicality. It just hasn't been like that for the last 4 or 5 years on that side of the ball. But anyway, due to that issue, the conventional wisdom was they need to draft a defensive lineman in the top 5. And the whole thing was that the best player that was going to be available there, Jalen Carter from Georgia, he had some off-field issues and concerns that had teams questioning whether they should draft him that high. Very talented player, but his off-the-field stuff, and it seemed like there was just like concerns over his dedication to football, like how much he really loves and lives and breathes football for it to be a top 5 pick. So I wanted Seattle to take him. I thought it was worth the risk. If you read anything about like the people who know stuff about the draft, the dude's football acumen was not even in the remotest of question. So I figured just take him and you can keep his head on straight. like Pete and John, they've had actually a couple situations where they've tried to do that and it's backfired. But this guy was so good. I was tantalized by the upside. But I wanted to talk about the player that they did end up taking at 5, who they passed on Jalen Carter for, Devin Witherspoon. The whole draft was fire. I'll just say that real quick. JSN, perfect pick. Exactly what Geno needs. I think that's a huge thing that's going to unlock the offense even more and get Geno's numbers even better. And then if you go down the list, the thing I liked overall about the draft was how it seemed like they just picked players from all the big schools that are really good at football. I feel like in the last few years, their drafting has become like they get too cute with it. I swear, so the Eagles had the most widely praised draft this year. All they did was take all the guys from Georgia.
Yeah.
That's literally all they did. Like everyone's like, Howie Roseman, the Birds GM, what a genius. This is the greatest draft I've ever seen. How did he do this? How does he stock up like this from here? And then you look at who they picked. It's literally just guys from Georgia, and then there's like an Alabama guy and like a Michigan guy. Yeah. You're like, okay, like that's, I guess, how you get praise from the draft pundit class. But like, I say that like jokingly, but like that is good strategy. That's smart.
Right.
Those schools have the best football teams. That means they probably have the best football players. Literally just take the guys from fucking Michigan, LSU, Georgia, all the most Alabama,
Ohio State,
all the most basics, Penn State.
Slip Penn State in there,
Penn State in there. Just all the most basic schools.
New Mexico State.
And definitely don't take any football player. Well, actually, that's funny because the Seahawks drafted a player from New Mexico who I'm really excited about. And New Mexico's football team is terrible. I never thought we would have anyone get drafted. But Devin Witherspoon, they ended up taking him over Jalen Carter. And I think the consensus was this was one of the best blue chip players in the class. So no one really questioned it. It's not like they took a lot of criticism for it. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, I totally get why Seattle picked that guy, even though Jalen Carter was there. But I fucking love this pick. I love this pick. This is such a good pick. And I'm going to explain to you not just why this was a good pick, but why they had to pick this guy. They had to pick this guy. Okay. Devin Witherspoon, cornerback from University of Illinois. No, you said you watched him play when he was in college quite a bit, no?
I did. I saw him. I mean, I'm a Big Ten, something like that.
Big Ten guy. Yeah.
Big Ten guy. Went to Penn State. Saw him play at Nebraska, at Nebraska as well. And dude is just a menace on the field. I mean, there's really no other way to describe the way that he plays. Like, I mean, I think you had said this at some point where he just plays like the old LOB guys. Like, he just crushes people. He loves to play. The second he steps on that field, it's like, it's over for you.
Just honestly, if you haven't done it yet, go YouTube his college highlights. It's the sickest college football highlight reel I've ever seen. Like, to defensive player wise, like, you could throw some like wide receivers and quarterbacks out there that probably have some like prettier
Saquon Barkley highlights.
Yeah, like, but like as far as a defensive highlight reel, every single one pops. Every single one pops, and that would be one thing, but it's about the way he plays the game. Okay. This dude, it's part of it is because he was wearing 31, but when he hits guys, they feel it. It literally looks like Cam Chancellor. He takes your soul.
He does.
They haven't had a player like that since Cam Chancellor that really instills fear in you. Devin Witherspoon is going to instill fear. Okay? You can tell from watching him play. Some people are concerned that he's only 5'10". I'm not concerned about that at all. If you watch those highlights that I'm talking about, you're not going to notice that he's 5'10". And his coverage grades from PFF were insane. Like, however much stock you put in those, if you grade out above 90, you're balling out there. So he hits like Cam Chancellor. And then the other thing I love about him is he loves to talk shit.
Yeah.
Loves to talk shit.
Yeah.
The whole game he's out there. He is just chirping. He's letting the wide receivers hear it. He's getting in their head. He never stops. He's talking the whole time. It's really fun to watch. And you know who that reminds me of? Richard Sherman.
Mm-hmm.
You're telling me we're talking about a guy who hits like Cam Chancellor and talks like Richard Sherman? Sign me up. Oh my God. Sign me up. I can't wait to watch this guy play. And like I said, like the way he plays football is like, that's the Seahawks brand. When we think about the Seahawks LOB days, that's what it was. Physical, brash. I'm gonna hit you so hard that you're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel me out there on the field, and then I'm gonna let you hear about it too.
Yeah,
because I'm better than you. That's that kind of stuff. That's why we all loved Richard Sherman.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he was so fun to watch, right?
And remember, this is like a guy from an Illinois team that almost beat Michigan.
They had one of the best defenses in the country, and he
far.
was he was the best player on that defense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just a great pick, man. And like, what I was thinking about with it was like how glad I am that like Pete and John are in control of that decision and not the fans. Because like, if it's me making that call based on what I know, I would have taken Jalen Carter. But Pete and John, they're actually behind the scenes, like evaluating it. And I doubt they ever had, I think they would have taken Will Anderson over Witherspoon if he was there. But I don't think they had any doubt that if it fell the way it did and Witherspoon was there and Carter was still there, I think they were going Witherspoon. And I'm just like, oh, like now looking into Witherspoon, like I have, I'm like, thank God that we took him and not Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter could still be great for Philadelphia. But like, I just think that this dude is going to be so fun to watch. He plays Seahawks football. He has swagger. It's a position of need, you know. Like I thought Michael Jackson. I only remember that's his name because his name was Michael Jackson.
Not to be confused with.
I thought he played pretty well last year, but Witherspoon's going to be an upgrade. Like I had, not to like belabor the point, I had one more Witherspoon story actually that I wanted to tell you, Noah, and then we're going to sign off up on out of here. But so I was listening last night to the Real Hawk Blogger podcast, because I listened to them to get a lot of my Seahawks news. And Hawk Blogger, the host, he was talking about a story that he heard from he was listening to a podcast where they were interviewing Devin Witherspoon's, it was either his defensive coordinator or his position coach. Can't remember exactly which one. The guy's name was Aaron Henry. I do want to shout out his name. But he was one of Devin Witherspoon's coaches at University of Illinois, and he was telling a story about like when he knew Devin Witherspoon was different. Okay, and I want you to listen to this story because this is crazy. So, it's University of Illinois football practice. Best defense in the country, so I imagine it's a very competitive type setting. They're going at it with the offense. The offense is running plays, like basically as like walkthrough plays, but the defense is trying to stop them. And they try and run a play. The receiver runs a slant. Okay. And Devin Witherspoon picks it off, houses it, 80 yards, pick six. The offensive coordinator went to the defensive coordinator or the position coach or whoever it was, and he's like, "Nah, fuck that. You're tipping the plays." He's like, "What?" He's like, "You're tipping the plays. There's no way that he knew that he was running a slant there. Like, how would he have known that? Like, you guys are tipping the plays. Stop tipping the plays. We're trying to like run this like it's real. Like, don't give your corner the routes." And the guy's like, "We're not tipping the plays." Like, he knew that slant was coming. And the guy's like, "Dude, there's no chance. There's no chance. He could not have known that." All right. So the position coach or whatever it was goes up to Devin Witherspoon. And he's like, "Other coach thinks that you got the play tipped, and that's how you knew the slant was coming." Devin Witherspoon's like, they thought that was tipped. Like, that's why I knew that. Devin Witherspoon's like, "Nah, fuck that. Fuck that. I'm not going to let that stand." Dude gets up in front of the entire team and he, point by point, explains exactly how he knew that the slant was coming. I can't break down like exactly how he would have done that, but it was something like he saw them run a certain formation the day before, and he knew based on the routes that they ran out of that formation that when they lined up a certain way the next day, he knew what route was coming and he jumped it. But it was all just crazy stuff that like the other defensive players on the team were like, dude, I would not have even fucking thought of that.
Yeah.
Like, how did you make like these connections between like the stuff that they were running yesterday and then figure out what route was coming like in a different, like I think the formation was like different and it was like somehow connected to what they were doing the day before. He figured out what route they were running, jumped it for a pick six, and then he when he was in front of the team, he proceeded to explain like exactly how he has figured out all their route concepts and tendencies. Like he broke it down for them and was like, boom, 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 boom. That's how I know what you're doing when you do this. That's how I know what you're doing when you do this. That's how I know what you're doing every time you line up. Like he was just going down, like basically point by point explaining to the offense how he's decoded their offense and knows exactly what they're doing on every play. Dude, I heard that story and I was like, yo, that's different.
Yeah.
That's different. That's not like, and another thing that Hawkblogger pointed out was that lines up exactly with what Pete was talking about after they drafted him. Pete was talking about how they were grinding film together, and Pete was asking him like, how do you make these reads? Like, how did you know? You know, there's the famous play on his highlight reel where he blew up the guy from Indiana. It looks like Cam Chancellor. Pete was asking him about plays like that. How did you know that was what was going to happen? How did you know this play was coming? How did you know this route? And Pete said the way that he breaks down the game and the way that he understands the game, and this is serious, man. Pete's not just going to say this.
Mm-mm.
He said it reminds him of Troy Polamalu, who Pete coached at USC.
That's crazy.
You're not going to...
That's...
I'm like, could be like, oh, that's a ridiculous comparison. You shouldn't say that about a guy who hasn't played yet. Pete is not going to say that unless he sees real, very tangible similarities in how they read the game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he's not going to say that.
And it sounds like if he doesn't work out, he's going to be a great coach for the Seahawks.
I mean, isn't that story crazy though?
Dude, that's like insane.
They're breaking down the like reading a route so well that your coach thinks that it got tipped to you, and then proceeding to explain how not only was it not tipped, but that you actually know everything that's coming from them on offense in every practice, and this is exactly how.
Yeah.
Different.
Einstein.
I can't wait to watch this guy play. All right, I think we're going to wrap it there. I think I might have just ripped off 2 hours of Scorchers right there. So until next time, we out.
Peace. What's going on, everyone? It's producer Noah here. I'm just jumping in to let you know that we need you to rate this episode. We need you to rate this episode and share it with your friends. It's more important than anything in the world. It's more important than LAFC winning Champions League. It's more important than Jordan Morris coming back from injury. It's more important than anything. So make sure you rate us 5 stars. Drop a comment on why you like it or why you don't like it, but just try not to hurt our feelings. And we'll see you next week.